Episode 5. Are you a thinker or a feeler? Do other people constantly hurt your feelings when communicating with you? Or are you told that your communication style upsets and offends other people? Do some people claim you're too hard and rational? Or do some people claim you're too emotional and irrational? We have two rational processes for making decisions, thinking and feeling. Although we can all use both processes, we prefer to use one over the other. Thinking is a logical thought process, and feeling is a values thought process. These differences often result in miscommunication, because we don't know how to identify and understand the other person's decision-making process, values, and communication style. Makes sense, doesn't it? If you're in or have been in a relationship, then you'll probably relate. Okay, in this episode, how about you join me and we solve your misinterpretation of other people's preferred style of decision-making? Hi, I'm Kate Mason, and for the record, in case you already didn't guess, I'm a feeling type. Welcome to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. This is the podcast connecting you to the ones you care about the most. Using personality tools will help you successfully create the best connection and relationships with everyone in your life, starting with your partner. This episode of Personalities, Parenting and Partners will focus on the third set of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or the MBTI as it's known. This third preference pair of the MBTI describes how you prefer to make decisions. In the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, thinking types have the letter T as the third letter of their type code. For example, ISTJ. Feeling types have the letter F as the third letter of their type code. For example, ISFJ. Do you like to put more weight on objective principles and impersonal facts? Thinking. Or do you like to put more weight on personal concerns and the people involved? Feeling. Now let's not confuse feeling decision-making with emotions. Everyone has emotions. Emotion is a strong feeling, such as love, anger, joy, hate, or fear. Someone who's highly emotional is just as likely to be a thinking type as a feeling type. Emotions are part of life for nearly everyone, regardless of their type. Also, do not confuse thinking with intelligence. I'm a feeling type, and I can think, and I like to think that I'm fairly intelligent. My family are all thinking types, and they're empathetic and kind. Everyone uses thinking for some decisions and feeling for others. We're talking about the MBTI decision-making processes. In fact, a person can make a decision using his or her preferred or their non-preferred decision-making process after weighing up the data that they have gathered. As we discussed in previous podcasts, which I suggest you listen to again if necessary, because sometimes second time around it can land differently. As we discussed in earlier podcasts, if you practice often enough, you can use your non-preferred type almost as efficiently as your preferred. Okay, it's listener participation time. Are you game? Stop for a moment and try this. Fold your arms, although not if you're driving or handling dangerous equipment. Now try and fold them in reverse. How does it feel? Does it feel uncomfortable? And does it take more time, more effort and thought? Try it again with your non-preferred arms, folding them 3 times in your non-preferred style. Does it get easier with practice? Yes, it does. And if you keep it up for even longer, you'll become even more competent at it. Same works for type. When you practice your non-preferred preference, you can become very good at it. We are all able to use both. Healthy feeling types will usually be compassionate and empathetic and will have a balanced sense of reason. Healthy thinking types will usually be logical and reasonable and will have a balanced sense of empathy. Take a minute to ask yourself which of the following descriptions seems more natural, effortless, and comfortable for you. Thinking types. When a thinking type makes a decision, they like to find the basic truth or principle to be applied, regardless of the specific situation involved. Thinkers make decisions with their head and try to be impersonal as they want to be fair and just in their decision-making. When questioning, thinking types focus on why. They look for logical reasons or solutions to almost anything. They like to analyze the pros and cons of a situation and be consistent and logical in their decision-making. They tend to notice inconsistencies and faults and can be quick to point them out, and they can appear to be critiquing and negative in their need to find out why. They believe telling the truth is more important than being tactful. Therefore, their conversation style is frequently straightforward and sometimes brutal and confrontational. However, they cannot see this. Sometimes they miss or don't value the people moment of a situation. They can be seen as too task-oriented, uncaring, or indifferent in their need to be competent. As for feeling types, well, let's see how this fits for you. Feeling types use personal values to make decisions. Their accepting focus is on who, and they want what is the best for the people involved in their decision-making process. They're persuasive, warm-hearted, and compassionate, and like to do whatever it takes to establish or maintain harmony between people. They believe being tactful is more important than telling the cold truth, and they consider the impact of their words and decisions on people. Sometimes they miss seeing or communicating the hard truth of situations. They seek personal approval and need to be appreciated, and sometimes they're seen by others as too idealistic, mushy, indirect, and needy. Write down which one you think you might be, remembering that you can use both, but one will be your more preferred. Now let's look at the impact these two different preferences can have on your views on life, your communication, and understanding of each other. When looking at these preference descriptions, are feeling types more sensitive to constructive feedback than thinkers? Yes, they are. And why? Well, feeling types are more sensitive to the perceived intentions and motives of others. They tend to take things more personally and be more affected by straight talk or criticism as they may perceive it. The feeler looks for true motivations, relationships, and the meanings behind words. They're looking for a personal, value-based truth. Who is this person? What is their motive? And what did they really mean when they said XYZ? Feeling types might hear words like, "You made a mistake," and interpret it as, "I'm disappointed in you. You're a failure. I don't like you." Feeling people talk about feelings and give positive, although according to some thinker types, almost sickening, words of affirmation. They also need personal and positive confirmation around the actions and thoughts that they say and do for others. Therefore, when talking about ability to accept criticism, yes, in general, feeling types will appear more sensitive than thinking types. Now, this is because the thinking type has a totally different thought process. The thinker looks for facts and accuracy behind an argument or a problem, and they're looking for logical, functional truth. The thinking type isn't looking for underlying motive or meaning or emotion, and they're able to accept "you made a mistake" as separate from personal significance. However, thinking types can also be sensitive, but usually around different criteria. They can get hurt feelings when someone insults their logic, their plans, or their competence. They might be able to accept constructive criticism like champs, but they may react strongly when someone teases them or makes them feel like a failure. Thinking people like logical praise for their efforts, nothing too floaty or elaborate, just enough to commend them on a job well done. The thinker can also be the last to admit that they're wrong in any given situation, particularly emotive ones where they see the other person as irrational and emotional. This helps them alleviate any feeling of being incorrect. I'm a feeling type and my husband Paul is a thinking type. In fact, my whole family are thinking types, which means I've been bombarded by thinking questions, thoughts, and values for many years. Remember, many of us are in relationships with the opposite type because it's these types that we're attracted to. Without knowledge about different personalities, I'm not sure how I would have survived. I think I would have been curled up in a ball in a corner by now. Feelers and thinkers' different communication styles can trip us up very easily in our relationships. My husband is a very kind, loving man. However, our different styles of thinking logic versus feeling values logic has stumped us many, many times. We initially had no idea about personality differences and saw the world through our own coloured lens, without awareness that there was any differentiation, just the thought that the other was either too emotional or too uncaring. There were many instances where Paul's logical conversation upset me. For example, one Saturday night I was cooking dinner and started to feel really unwell. I said to Paul, "I feel really sick right now and I think I need to lie down." "No worries," he responded. "Just finish cooking the dinner first, though." I was like, seriously? How thoughtless. When I challenged this on him later, he said to me, very logically, "Well, there was no point in leaving the dinner half-cooked if you were able to finish cooking it before you decided to lie down." True, but not really empathetic. Thinkers so often upset feeling and thinking types with their unwitting, brutal conversation. Paul and I run swimming schools, and one of our managers, Trevor, who's a haemophiliac, had been bleeding internally and was in intensive care in hospital. We went in to visit him. As we walked in, my first question was, "How are you, Trevor?" So he gave us a rundown on his poor health. Then Paul spoke. "When will you be back at work?" I looked at him in horror. How unfeeling and rude. This reaction to Trevor's illness stuck in my head, and it wasn't until many years later, when we were discussing personalities, that I mentioned this incident and how I felt about it. Paul was very upset at my view of his question. He said to me, "I knew how ill he was, therefore I needed to know how long he'd be off work in order to replace his work hours. In doing so, I could then let him know that he didn't need to concern himself about work, just about getting better." Wow, what a revelation. What a misunderstanding on my behalf. Here was me thinking him insensitive, and yet he was using his thinking logic to care and help Trevor. How often does this occur between thinking and feeling types? All the time. I have met many wounded feeling types, often females, I must admit, who are either feeling unloved, uncared for, rejected, bullied, or just plain unhappy due to the misunderstanding that the thinker's logical, apparently uncaring language brings to their relationship. They are unable to see their way forward because, without any knowledge about these differences and no tools to fix their problems, they are unable to. We'll look at solutions to this at the end of the podcast. Because the feeling type uses their empathy and desire for harmony to make their decisions, the thinker's logical approach does not hit any of these buttons. My husband's first words in a conversation are usually, "You would think." Mine are, "I feel." The thinker thinks. All people make logical decisions as they themselves do. They question the validity of the feeling person's decision-making pattern and can dismiss it as too sentimental and sensitive. But actually, the thinker gets very stressed when the feeling typer feels hurt and sad. The feeler's use of emotive language, tears, words of expression of unhappiness or annoyance can create stress for the thinker. They feel threatened by this overwhelm of sentiment, and their first reaction is to try and fix it in a logical, sensible way. We know thinkers can use their feeling side, as we all can use our less preferred sides. However, if they're not used to using the emotions and language attached to feelings that come more naturally for the feeling type, this transition can be difficult. When confronted with non-logical, emotional situation, the thinker feels overwhelmed and can come up with phrases like, "You'll be right. Stop those tears. Why do you always have to cry? Just talk to me. You're just doing this to make me feel bad. I can't deal with this. I'm leaving." Pull yourself together. As I've mentioned, Paul is a thinking type and I'm a feeling type, and we used to have these issues too. He would get angry when I cried, and I would cry more because I wasn't getting the warm, nurturing response that I needed. So we would both end up fighting even more because we misunderstood each other's emotional EQ. Then one day we sat down, separate to an emotional event, and discussed how we each felt. Paul said that he felt out of control. He didn't know how to comfort me, and that made him feel uncomfortable and useless. Even if the sadness and tears were not his fault, he felt to blame in some way. When he tried to reason using logic and facts, and I didn't feel any better or stop crying, he then felt frustrated, and this frustration led to anger and annoyance. I told him I felt like my emotions weren't being recognized, and he was just pushing me away and not listening. Hearing each other's thought processes was such an eye-opener. After all, neither of us had any idea what was going on in the other person's head. We were just presuming through our own perception. With this knowledge in hand, we worked out what to do in future situations when this happened. I told him he just needed to hug me, listen, and not to solve. He agreed, but then said he needed to have a logical discussion about the problem after the tears, so that he could sort it out in his own head. We're much more aware of our emotions these days. These situations do not often rear their ugly heads. Every now and then I might just have to remind him, just hug and listen. Or he might say, just talk to me so I can see the reasoning. Let's talk about validation and the thinker and feeler. We all like to be recognized and appreciated. However, the language styles of the thinking and feeling types, when being validated, can be very different. Feeling type people like praise along the lines of personal appreciation, such as, "You're a star. Your help has been so much appreciated. What would we do without you? We just love having you on the job. I love hanging around with you." The thinking type also enjoys praise and recognition, but the words mentioned above are often too cloying and sickening for them. They would prefer sentences such as, "Well done, the job went really smoothly. You worked really hard, and this is a great product of your success. Great work. Congratulations on finishing the project on time. You're a great husband and provider. You manage everything so well." Thinkers try to solve problems with solutions and ideas. Feelers follow their feelings. Considering this, I asked a thinking friend for his feedback on my podcasts. His thought processes are the opposite of mine, and he and I both know this. He didn't want to hurt my feelings with his logical critique of my work, so he asked if I really wanted to know. I took a breath, mentally prepared myself, and said yes. He said that it was a bit too personal for him, too much about me. He thought that I needed guest speakers. He hadn't heard my more recent podcasts. He thought that a few real facts and figures about relationships would create relevance. Therefore, showing how I help people with real problems that currently exist in their lives. For him, the real-life data is always good, especially in episodes that don't have guests. And then he admitted, as he and I knew already, that my style of podcast was not really his. Phew! I took his feedback on board. After all, everyone sees situations differently. If I'm not receptive to constructive feedback, how can I learn and improve, no matter how it might feel? So let's listen and learn. How do thinking types communicate? They're problem solvers. They need to know why. They ask questions, sometimes lots of them, until they're satisfied with the answer. They use logic and analysis to spot flaws and weaknesses, and love to debate and challenge information, particularly if there's no evidence to back it up. They prefer information that's presented objectively. They trust competence, expertise, and are task and goal focused. They use logical, straightforward, often critiquing language. Paul, Cassie, both thinkers, and I all work Saturday mornings in our family business. Cassie woke up with a migraine one Saturday morning and was feeling very sick. I told Paul how unwell she was and pleaded with him to let her stay home. He was annoyed, muttering she'll be okay, she can't miss any more time off work. Just give her some food and some paracetamol and she'll be fine. I told Cassie what his thoughts were. She was furious. She yelled back from her bedroom, even though she had a headache. I've been to work 13 out of 15 Saturdays, and I'm staying home. Paul loved that answer. It appealed to his logic. Sure, he said, I understand. Just stay in bed. And off we went to work. A great learning experience for us feeling types. Give the thinker objective, logical, concise information, and you might get what you want. Communication approach. How do feeling types communicate? Feeling types are warm, supportive, expressive, and affirming. When they meet people, they enjoy sharing personal situations, ideas, and stories. They see the strengths and positive attributes in people and enjoy giving encouragement and positive feedback. They like collaboration and want to cooperate. Their communication is focused on people and harmony. When I'm sick, my family tell me to man up. You'll be okay. Just take some Panadol. You think you're sick? I had such a bad headache last week. When they're sick, I ask if they're okay. Can they get to go to school or manage work? Do they need me to ring up and let people know that they're unwell? Would they like any medication or food? Is there anything that I can do for them? Such a difference. Well, I no longer have any expectations. If I want lots of sympathy and attention, I go to my feeling type friends. Because really, why look for something in someone that they cannot always give you? Enjoy them for who they are and understand they cannot fulfill all of your personality needs. When you let go of your expectations, you will love them so much more. Today I'm talking to Ariana. She's an INFP. She's an intuitive feeling type, so her feeling preferences for harmony, compassion and empathy are not just about her immediate environment, but about the world, its people and the future. Hi Ari, welcome to Personalities, Parenting and Partners.
Hi Kate, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now you're 21 years old. I wish I'd known about the tools of understanding people and personalities when I was your age. So where and when did you begin your personality journey?
Well, actually in high school we had a class one day and we went through love languages and the personality types. So we took a quiz online and I thought that was really fun. Yeah, it was really eye-opening.
Right. And so from high school, did it stay with you all that time or did you discover more about it when you got older as you moved along?
No, absolutely stayed with me. Yes. And I kept retaking the quiz to see if things had changed, but it didn't. And yeah, no, I've always thought about it and definitely now I'm thinking about what other people's personality types are and how I can best work with them.
Yes, yeah, which is amazing knowledge to actually have here because I was 26 when I discovered personalities and I wish I'd known a lot more when I was younger. And my belief system actually is that the more you know about yourself and the younger you are, the better it is for you as you go through life. So what changed for you when you did understand it about your own self?
I think that I knew how I would react to situations a little bit better and how I did view the world. And what was really eye-opening for me was that not everyone saw things as similarly as I thought they did.
Yes.
Yeah, they didn't have the same values. And I think, going through life, obviously growing up, and becoming an adult, it's really good to know that there's so much diversity in personalities.
Absolutely. And that is the thing about people, is that they don't realise that actually nobody probably thinks the way that they do. But you sit in that shell of thinking, oh, well, everyone's thinking exactly what I'm thinking. So the discovery of that is an amazing discovery and a great one to have. Like I say, especially at your age, it's a wonderful thing to have. Now, we're talking about thinking and feeling today. And so I'm just wondering, what kind of type are you more attracted to in a relationship, a thinker or a feeler?
I would definitely say a thinker, because they tend to ground me.
Right.
Because I am not necessarily that feeling equals emotion, but I am quite emotional.
Right.
And my feelings can be quite strong. So it's good to have this solid foundation that can bring me out of my emotional state when I need it.
Okay.
And then also I feel like I can balance them out as well a bit better as well.
Very true, very true. So you've never actually found any feeling type appeals to you in a male? That's not a thing that you would ever...
I think feeling qualities are really great, but I think the foundation of thinking is better suited to me.
Excellent. Beautiful. So what initially attracts you? Is it that logics that attracts you and that grounding? Because often those things are things that are not going to attract you later on down the track.
Yeah.
So that's what attracts you initially. So what stresses you when you're actually after that initial attraction? What stresses you about that?
It's difficult to communicate sometimes. I tend to use I statements when I'm communicating, and not everyone gets that. It depends how strong of a thinker they are. But
So tell me what an I statement looks like.
I'm like, I feel that things have been happening this way, and then the thinker might say, well, tell me a situation when it did, like date and time. I need it. I don't know.
So to a degree, we're told to talk in I and feeling statements, and it's actually not really a logical conversation to have with the thinking type, because when you do that, they actually want to lock you into the facts and details and when and how and why, and you end up going, oh my goodness, stuck in a corner, hit by all these logical facts that you need to fill out for them, so to speak. Yes, yep. So if that doesn't work for you, what can you see as working for you when you have this conversation and you need to bring something up without being pushed into a corner? What kind of thing might work for you better?
Definitely having examples for at least one of what happened when, and then following that up with how I feel.
What do you like, therefore, in that sense, about having those thinking types in your life? So what do they bring to the table for you, not just in your conversation and thinking like that, but what do they bring to the table for you in everything in life, like not just relationships, going out, just doing things in general?
I would say that thinking types tend to add a layer of depth to what I'm experiencing. They'll add something new that I haven't thought about. My dad's a thinker, so I really like having conversations with him because of how different we see the world. Yeah.
Fantastic. So how do you brace yourself for a conversation that might be uncomfortable now that you know that the conversations are going to be really different? Do you have any mental preparation that you might make for yourself?
Yeah, it would all be about preparation, knowing what points I'm going to make, maybe even writing some dot points on my phone and making sure I don't get off track.
Yes.
Because as a conversation goes and I'm uncomfortable, I'll tend to try and make them feel better, but then I might lose my point.
Yes.
And it just gets a bit muddy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also if you show a lot of too much emotion, even though we're saying it's not always about emotion, but if you show too much emotion, that can be quite overwhelming for a thinking person too, can't it? And so when that happens, they tend to pull back, or they even get a little bit more thinking, so to speak. So they keep going with their thought process even more so because they can't understand why you might be so upset because it's not logical.
But luckily for me, I find that the closest thinkers in my lives are very good with emotion, and they don't get overwhelmed by that, which I'm very lucky.
Yeah, excellent. And when we talk about thinking language, and sometimes how brutal it might seem, and even thinkers actually upset other thinkers because of the way they speak, because they're not aware. They're usually talking in a very straight, logical, well, they need to know kind of language. How do you put yourself in a place where that doesn't hurt you so much anymore? How do you rationalise that to yourself?
Well, I think maybe this is just my personality type, but I like to think that unless they very obviously are trying to hurt me, they're probably not.
Good.
Yeah. And so I'll just take what works for me and leave what doesn't.
Excellent. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So sometimes it'll still hurt a bit, but I just take it as it comes and then I will rationalise it in my head.
Yes.
And then remind myself that I'm not a bad person. It's okay. And they're just trying to help.
Excellent. Because what I often say to feeling people is, unless they're being rude or nasty and there's spiteful words involved, it really is just straightforward logical language. And like you say, if you can separate yourself from it and come back from that and go, well, look, they're probably just trying to help me, which they think they are, even though you might not think so, then that's the rationale behind it. And it really does help you out, and it helps you survive in that kind of relationship. You know, aside from them needing to know how you feel as well, which is really, really important. So your current partner, does he in contact with how you feel and understand all of that?
Absolutely. Even though it may be a bit uncomfortable at times, I know that he's really trying to look past whatever is making him a bit uncomfortable and think deeper and understand. He definitely understands that I am a feeler and wants to communicate with me in a way that is constructive.
Yeah, that's great, because also the other thing too is that if you both understand and you can both look at the world through each other's lens, then you are going to have a much more successful relationship moving forward.
Absolutely.
Because communication, as we know, is the key to all of these things. So just the last thing, I would love to know what your best tip for a feeling type who's in a relationship with a thinking type is.
That is a tough one. I would say that if you're feeling in a relationship with a thinking type, it's important sometimes to ask more questions. Don't take everything they say at face value because sometimes they may not have meant it in the way that you understood it, going back to things like perception.
Yes.
I think it's also important to help them understand where you come from if they don't know already and they don't really understand feeling types, that it's important for them to maybe soften on their logical side sometimes with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the important thing also is to actually introduce them to stuff like the Myers-Briggs type indicator if they don't already know about this kind of thing, because part of their love for you should be looking at how you view the world as well.
Yeah.
So really, really important. Thank you so much for coming on today, Ari. I really loved having you.
Thank you, Kate.
And for the listeners out there, it would be really wonderful, no matter what age you are, to start learning about these personality tools. So if you've got children who are in their teens, it's a really valuable instrument to introduce them to then, as well as love languages, which I'll be talking about in later podcasts. Once most couples realise that natural differences are at play and neither is intentionally responding the way they do in order to get his or her own way, they can then accommodate and compromise in areas that had not been possible before. The art of communicating successfully with thinking types. Be calm and objective. Show your competence. Offer honest, frank feedback as well as positive comments, and accept critical feedback without personalising it. Avoid becoming overly emotional or passionate when discussing issues. Be logical, reasonable, clear, precise, and concise. Focus on tasks and objectives, as well as the individuals involved in the situation. Look for the language. If you're a feeling type, is it different to yours? Unless the language is spiteful, abusive, or otherwise personally offensive, hear it and acknowledge it, accept it and talk it, and man up. Remember that most people are not out to hurt your feelings. The art of communicating successfully with feeling types. Take time to get to know them and develop a rapport. Be friendly, approachable, and offer encouragement, support, and focus on people and their feelings. Be patient and respectful, and avoid blunt communication, unless the situation absolutely requires it. Connect first. Express the positives before the negatives. Know when to provide feedback gently, and critique behaviours, not people. Be careful to acknowledge and not to analyse the other person's feelings and values. And above all, if you're a thinking type talking to a feeling type, don't dismiss the need for handling feeling people in their preferred style. After all, do you want to be the blunt tool in the shed or the sharpest when it comes to relationships? Are thinking and feeling types compatible? Yes, they are. Logic and emotions are equally important for a balanced, healthy, and happy relationship. It's essential to maintain a balance between mind and heart in relationships. Take on board each other's communication styles, practice them, talk about your differences, and understand the relationship benefits. This will build trust, reduce misunderstandings, and create a great sense of teamwork. No one is right or wrong, just different, and different is okay. I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. We would love it if you could leave a rating and a review. This would certainly help others learn and also enjoy this podcast. If you have a podcast idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my newly launched book, Who is This Monster or Treasure in My House?, on Booktopia or Amazon. I'm Kate Mason. Thank you for listening to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. See you next time.